What's going on, everyone? Vampyr Gaming here, and today we're going to be talking about the ban list. So, this is a video I've been wanting to make for some time, and just wanted to. I tried to see if I could get like a feature on here, just that way it wasn't just my thoughts entirely, but a lot of people were relatively busy. So it is what it is. But today we're going to talk about the ban list. So there's an upcoming one on August 12th, the day after One Piece Day in Japan, and I believe we will see quite a few things that day. But in this video today, we're going to talk about what I think makes a healthy format, the cards that I think should be banned, and then also just like my overall thoughts on a ban list, and if I think anything is going to be unbanned. So let's go ahead, take a look here at the ban list. Just kidding. Haha, JK. Haha, JK. So yeah, this is kind of just like a rough idea of what I think will be banned. I took it and just did a mock-up with what happened last time. We'll kind of dive into these just a little bit further, but just wanted to kind of just get some people fired up. You may not agree with the decisions that I think will be banned, but I will do my best to try to explain and justify why I think this may happen. Granted, now this is just all cards that I think could be potential, not these, but what we'll talk about here will be just all the cards that I think. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's talk about what I think makes a healthy format, and we'll kind of like reference some other things we see here. So I think the basis for that is almost like OP02, OP03. You did have Zoro, you did have Newgate, but you saw a decent variety outside of that. You would see Smoker, you would see Red Green Law. You had a couple of decks, Doflamingo, that you could choose from and give you just some options. So what I think makes a healthy format is you have a decent amount of diversity, any deck with relatively good cards. Emphasis on good cards, because some cards just don't have good support. Some leaders don't have good support. Some leaders don't have good abilities. But relatively speaking, a variety of leaders with good cards can do well, and you just have that diversity. You're not locked into one deck, and I think we also avoid OP05, where we had, of course, the cookie cutter format. You're either playing Luffy, Enel, or Saka. That was like it. And then if you're not playing one of those, you pretty much have a hard loss against one of those. So it's like, okay, if you're playing Saka, you kind of like lose to Enel. If you're playing Luffy, you lose to Enel. I don't remember what what it was. Or if you're playing Enel, you just hard lose to Luffy and all of that. So you avoid that. I think my best point of reference was like 4.75 right before the new structures, because you had so many leaders in all of those events. You had like 7 or 8 leaders in the top 8, and then came the new structure decks. And truthfully, looking back, I think that RP Luffy, because Newgate was banned, but here comes a new 6K leader that doesn't go to 0. I think RP Luffy was just absolutely hands down like a tier 0 deck. We just didn't really realize it until it's too late. Johnny did. He won back-to-back regionals like an absolute savage through Top Cut. What a guy. He's just built different. But yeah, I think something like that is a great point of reference for what I think makes a healthy format. And then so now let's kind of talk about cards that might be banned. So we're going to go through here, look at cards that I think might be banned, but then I'm going to elaborate on each one individually and like what I think they fall under, because if you look back and you remember the OP04 ban list, they hit a number of things when they finally decided to get rid of Newgate, because if they get rid of Law, they have to make sure they check everything else to make sure that there isn't just a new tier 0 deck, because that was the whole point of the list to begin with. And I think they did a phenomenal job when they finally got it right. So, yeah, I think first up on the list, of course, Gecko Moria. Gecko Moria is there's no other card in any other color like it except Judge. except Judge. Judge is fairly similar to Moria, if not arguably better, but no other card creates value like he does in the way that he does with the consistency that he does. And so I think this card, I mean, you know, it's just people start chaining Morias. You're having Moria battles with Law out of the way. You know, Lucci could possibly be the best. There's a card that I think will be the best deck, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. If you follow me on X, you already know where I'm going with that. But I think Gecko Moria is like top tier option. The moment this card was printed, I said this card should be banned. This card never should have been printed, especially with the stat line that he's given. An 8-9. This card is just absolutely absurd. And then, of course, we've got Sabo. So my biggest thing for Sabo is, one, again, like these, the Black Mirrors, Lucci, but then also, so it hurts Lucci, but at the same time it hurts another deck, Black Yellow Luffy. I think Sabo could be up there. Portgusty Ace, of course, if you hurt any other deck, and you don't hurt Yellow, you pretty much pave the way for Yellow to be the greatest deck. We'll talk a little bit more on that, but yeah, I think all of these three cards, and then, of course, Reiju. I think Reiju could be banned. I put Gordon here just because I always say ban Raise Max just to kind of get people fired up, because obviously Gordon's more expensive, but they are printing another 1-drop 2000 that does this exact same thing. I don't know what it is with them in printing these cards, but they absolutely love it. And then there's Pudding. I will have a slide with the translation for those who are unfamiliar, but Pudding is an OP08 card that I believe presents a problem in the meta as well. Each one of these are key cards for the tier 0 deck, and there is, of course, the option where you can hinder the deck rather than just outright ban it. So, yeah. We'll go ahead, and then last two cards, I think, you know, of course, Law Leader is not off of the table. It is quite possible that we see him just being banned. It would make sense. And then, of course, the card that some people seem to think is the problem, which is Maria. And we'll kind of just talk about how I feel about all of these. But yeah, I think all of these cards here are all the cards that possibly could be on that list. And then, so first up, of course, these two, Gecko and Sabo. They would impact Gecko Moria, Lucci, and Black Yellow Luffy. Black Yellow Luffy, of course, you know, 9k leader. You play it for one card, you get 2 blockers. You know, you get the legendary 20 Dawn turn. You attach to, you play this, you get 10 Dawn worth of characters. Absolutely insane in that, and then plus the 9k leader is just a bit of a problem. RP Law just starts bottom decking the Sabos and taking away that piece, and I think really kind of just holding him back. He did very well in OP07 in Asia. I think people are really starting to pick up steam with him now here. I think a lot of people were on Lucci train. I think now we're moving towards RP, Law, and Black Yellow Luffy. But Sabo, once they start chaining Sabos, like Lucci just gets shut down, Gecko gets shut down, every black deck gets shut down. The only thing that doesn't is, of course, the bottom decker, Law. And with Law out the way, I think a 9 leader does a 9 life leader, or 9k power leader, does present a problem in the meta, and you can solve that, plus also weaken black with Lucci and Gecko with this card, or through Gecko Moria. If you don't, I think almost Sabo is the better hit, because then like you can still leverage Gecko, but then it makes it harder for you to save it, brings more value to Borsalinos, and you take away the one thing that Luffy had going for them, and so it makes it a bit harder for them to be protected at a 9k leader. But if you get rid of Gecko, you can still keep Sabo, but it makes their 9 life leader a lot more expensive because they have to spend at least 3 cards, 1 to trash, and then 2 of the babies to bring out, and they can't just on demand spit out Sabos. So I think either of these can be a great choice for that. And then, of course, you have to keep Yellow in mind. And Enel, obviously the most obvious Yellow deck. He will forever be reasonable and decent just because he's a like 7 life leader, even though he's printed at 4. And so you've got this. I think it is hands down the best card to be added to the deck, right? Like, you play this, you gain a life no matter what. So you go to 3 or you go to 2 and you crack them for 10. I think this card has the most instant value out of any of the decks. Or any of the cards in yellow. So I believe that you need to answer yellow to some degree. If you remove Law and we touch any other deck, it makes way for Enel to just be a different kind of beast, and so you have to keep a pulse on that. And possibly, like, does this need to be banned? Maybe not. Maybe it's put to 1. I think that's slightly more fair. I don't think it's ban worthy, just because I don't think it makes yellow that insane. I don't think, but like, if you hit other decks, you just got to keep in mind of that small gap there. That is yellow, because yellow does yellow things, and they always will. It's the only deck that you can win just by getting lucky. Your win con is fortune, right? But yeah, I think Portgisty Ace, the Rusher Ace, is one of those cards that could be banned. And then we look ahead to RP Law. I think RP Law is, of course, the #1 problem. I think everybody there agrees. So this is Black Maria. If you're unfamiliar, once per turn. Activate main. If you have no other Black Maria characters, add up to 5 Dawn cards from your Dawn deck and rest them. And then, at the end of your turn, return Dawn from your field to your Dawn deck until you have the same number as your opponent's cards, Dawn cards. So if your opponent doesn't do a bunch of minus, you can go right back up. And you can go -5 if you want, -6. Right back. So this card has been a problem because, 1, it's a 2K on top of it, so you can counter if you want. But you just establish one of these, boom, you get 5 Dawn back. It solves the problem in Law. Law has 2 problems. One is resources, because it continues spits them out. And then one, well, they're both resource problems, but one is cards in hand, which, because it spits them all out, and very few of them replace themselves. And then you have Dawn management. So one specific card called Reiju solves one of those problems. This card solves the other problem. So if you get rid of both of these cards, you give Law back his problems. And he doesn't have a lot of solutions, so then he has downside. I like Maria, though, because I really want to play Maria in Kaido. So that it's like a love-hate relationship, and it makes me sad. So I personally don't want this card to be banned. But I think it's ban-worthy, especially because we have RP Luffy, and you have OP09. You've got our black-purple Luffy coming out, which can play 10-drop Luffy, get 3 Dawn, go to 5 next turn, swing 7, 12, play Maria, go back up to 10 next turn, play Law, do the same thing, go 5, play Sabo. Another reason why I think Sabo should be hit. Draw 2 cards, you know, now you got a blocker, 2 12, or well, 1 12k because you have the bottom deck, the other one, but like, and you're just spitting out absolute madness, just insane amounts of pressure. And then we have Pudding. Pudding essentially replaces Eustace. If you know Noel, if you're familiar with him, he believes that you no longer need Eustace Kid because you have this. This is a Eustace on 3. Your turn, once per turn, when a Dawn card on your field is returned to your Dawn deck, add up to 1 Dawn card from your Dawn deck and rest it. So you get 1 rested Dawn instead of 1 active Dawn, but you can play this on 3. And if you really want, you can play Eustace on 5 and then minus both. Gain 1 rested, 1 active, play Maria, and just lose nothing, you know? But that's neither here nor there. You've got just a lot of opportunity with this. It's a cheaper Law. It can't be KO'd by red because it's a 4. You know, it is a 3, so it does cost something for, you know, any kind of removal. It's very strong. And it forces them to be like 5 and then Lucci, and you have to have something in trash or something. So like this body is just like you played on this turn, and it's better Zoro Joro almost because you just can get instant value with the ramp. But you do have to minus. But again, you don't get punished because you just play Maria. But yeah, so that's Pudding if you weren't familiar. But yeah, I think Pudding would make some sense just because it's like you play Pudding and Eustace and you're just getting double the value. But again, this card isn't a problem in I think any other deck. It's just Law exclusively. So I think this is lower on the list of terms of cards that should be banned. And then, of course, you know, we see the pudding, right? But then you've got Reiju. So, again, just circling back. Why do I think Reiju should be banned? Because there's a ton of, and, you know, if you need to dislike the video, go on ahead. But Reiju. One, the Reiju deck is absolutely insane. It's like the only deck that can have 4 big drops on board, 10 cards in hand, and 4 life still. Because they just counter, so they can play Reiju and they draw it all back. And they only need 1 Reiju to use Reiju, because then they just have to play Baby Reiju. So, or they could just, if they don't see Baby Reiju and they have another one of these, they can hard cast it. So they have a lot of different options to continue to draw. But when they use Baby Reiju, they get the draw 3. You thought Pot of Greed was busted. What if I told you you get the Pot of Greed, then do a half Pot of Greed? That's what Reiju is. And so Reiju gets destroyed by Law because they're just like, oh, minus 2,000, bottom deck your Reiju, because they retrieve from trash, but you bottom deck it, you take that away. But then also, Law only has 2 sources of card replacement, and that is Queen. You play Queen, Dawn -1, draw 2, trash 1, replaces itself. Then you play Reiju, which is a genuine +1. So you spit this out. After you minus, you're guaranteed to have less, and then you draw 2 cards, and it puts you right back. And then if they continually see this, they get to dig for their pieces, dig for whatever. And it's just the fact that, like, you get this. Reiju can now play Judge, so this hits Reiju and Law by doing that. And I think Reiju is still playable. I think Reiju is still playable. And if they solve all the decks properly, Reiju is still playable. And maybe, you know, maybe it's a 1. Maybe it's a 1 just to satisfy everybody. But I've never seen Asia do a limited. We've only seen the English Bandai TCG game do a limited. So, but I do think, like this, the aggro deck has resource management in essence with Reiju, because then they get their, you know, get resources back. Same with Maria, it solves both of their problems, because if Law doesn't see Reiju, they're sitting there with like 2-3 cards in hand. When they play Reiju and they're like, oh, I have 5 again. And the 5 dynamic versus 3 dynamic is huge. And the math, you know, the math is very easy with 3 cards. Math gets a bit harder with 5. And then, of course, Gordon, again, like I say ban Raise Max just to kind of get people fired up because Gordon's expensive. I digress. There's another one coming. There's another Gordon coming. Not like this Gordon, but there's another 1-drop 2,000 that does the exact same thing. So we'll see what happens here. But so if they don't ban him, you know, I mean, it makes no sense with the new one coming. But, like, this would solve half of the problem. Honestly, I think the biggest solution is putting Gordon at 1 and Raise Max at 1, so you can only play 2. But this is also the deck's biggest downfall at the same time. But it is their most consistent 6K removal, and their easiest way for them to remove 6Ks. So, it is what it is. But, yeah, I think this card obviously allows in the bottom deck a lot more without having to play, like, events and things like that, and for the cheapest price. And let's talk about the leader, Trafalgar. So obviously the leader immediately answers the problem, and it doesn't create like what we had with 4.5 to 4.75, to where you had to have 2 ban lists in the same format after a ban list the format before, all to hit 1 deck. So they could just skip that ship, ban Trafalgar Law. Do I think it makes sense? Yes, but I think the problem is if you do that, you do have to hurt the other decks. I stand by that. You know, again, maybe it's hitting Reiju, because I think Reiju then becomes a top competitor. That's my thoughts, and I think if you know, maybe even you put it to 1. Maybe put it to 1. All you need is 1, right? You just need the 1 in your trash. So you get it, you can just cycle it indefinitely anyways. But I do think that this solves the biggest bulk of the problem, but then of course I think you need to answer some of the other things, because if not, you can just lead the way for another tier 0 format with one other deck just being indefinitely better than the others. And so then let's finally, to wrap things up, do I think something is going to be unbanned? I think the counter argument is, like, you know, it's like ban Law. Well, it's like, why not unban Sakazuki? You know, give full Sakazuki power and really just have that fight for justice. You know, see if Saka has what it takes to knock him down a peg, and we just go back to Saka format. Then I think everybody's happy. You know, maybe just knock them down a peg. I do think we could see, like, you know, if we ban other things, we could see Great Eruption become unbanned. Honestly, you might even be able to see Sakazuki become unbanned, but he does have the absolute best effects in the game. No other deck can just dig for cards organically and load their trash in the way he could. And then he also has 2 free effects. But you've got Blackbeard on the horizon. You know, we've got these new structure decks. Red's finally getting some okay-ish support, so it'll be interesting to see. I did go ahead and pick up the leader. Do I think these will become unbanned? No, I think not yet, but I do think Great Eruption's more likely to become unbanned, like the card at $1, you know? But as always, if you found this content of value, if you could just do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below what card you think will be banned.